They didn't just take us and put us on a reservation, they always took us off of our ancestral land. So if you look, very few reservations are on that people's ancestral land. Most reservations are away. So like even if they only moved you 100 miles, they would move you 100 miles away from the areas where your people used to circulate. It literally psychological warfare. So like, look, it's not much different from how they treat Jews, right? So what was the one thing the Romans did immediately? They exiled you, they expelled you, right? And why did they do that? Because they wanted to destroy your peoplehood. They wanted to remove you from history. And the same thing happened to us, only, you know, we were, I guess the nice way to say it, we were looked at as an impediment, where you were looked at as a problem. So like the Romans wanted to get rid of you because you kept rebelling, where the white people wanted to get rid of us because they wanted our land. So there's a little bit of a difference there, like in the motivation, but the method was the same. Be really precise in my language, because like really the most important thing to understand about the genocide is that it's a systematic destruction of a people, right? Now with your people, the genocide that happened was very like fast, like it was over a couple years, and it was industrial. So they came up with modern methods to kill more of you. It's horrible. With our genocide, it happened over hundreds of years, right? As I've gotten older, I've started to realize, look, in order to function in a modern society, you have to be part of that society. And as unfortunate as it might be for us, we have to understand that, look, we're outnumbered significantly, which is one of the differences between our situation and the Israeli situation, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that we can learn from the creation of Israel. There's a lot of things that we can learn from the Jewish people and how they've navigated coming back to their ancestral land and rejuvenating a language. Those are lessons we absolutely can learn, right? Other lessons we can learn are, you know, like a lot of people want me to say that we can learn how you defeated an occupying power, but the truth was the British as an occupying power here were numerically tiny, right? Whereas the British in Canada became the numerical majority very quickly. So us to use the way that you used, basically making an occupation cost more than the benefits of the occupation, isn't going to work. But what we can do is we can apply some of those lessons, and we can achieve participatory power, which is something we don't have in government. And I genuinely believe we can learn lessons from you guys about that. Like, and I've tried to I've tried to get other Native people to see Israel the way I see it, because I think it's vital. I think if more Native people came here, especially around Yom HaTzmaut, they would understand on a deep level that you people achieved self-determination, national self-determination on your ancestral land. And like, we might not be able to get full national self-determination, but we should at least be able to achieve partial self-determination. And we should at least be able to participate in our own governance. It's really tough when someone comes and says, you know, oh, we feel for you and we have so much empathy and you're such a victim and it's so horrible what happened to you, so it's okay that you're useless, right? Meanwhile, there's a lot of young people that we don't feel like we're useless. So it's like, no, we're like, you keep your empathy to yourself, you know? And I think more and more young people now are moving away from that leftist activist paradigm, and they're just like, hey, you know what? We need to do stuff to move our people forward. So you're seeing young people going to school, you know, getting education, doing a lot more, you know, like lawyers, doctors, stuff like that. And I think when you start seeing that, you start seeing the improvement of communities, and we need to improve our communities. That's kind of what I've always kind of advocated. It's especially tough for us because a lot of times what happens are young people, they go away, they go to school, and when they come home, they've seen what the rest of the world does. They've seen how everyone else lives. And like I'm speaking from personal experience, you know, like when I moved to the city and I came home, I can still remember my cousins were like in shock that I had a big screen TV, you know, that I would go on vacations and travel. And they were just like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean, what am I doing? And they were like, how do you afford all this? And I told them, I work, right? Like I have a good job. And the thing is, a lot of people up north, they do work and they work hard, but then they get their money and they buy something, they stay home, you know, they'll buy another quad or they'll buy a rifle, you know? And it's like, And then what happened sadly is that when the oil field and the lumber industries kind of died out, those same people that worked really hard, they would have to leave if they wanted to keep working, right? So then you have people, either you stay home on the res or you leave and go find work. And that's really tough. It's really hard to maintain a coherent community when people are leaving because they got to work. Because who are the people that really are the backbone of your community? They're the people that work hard, right? I mean, I see it with you guys. Like all of my friends here, like you and like Jonathan, all these people that, like you're working constantly, you're always doing something. And it's like my dad says, if you need something done, you ask a busy person. Because the busy people are the ones that get shit done, right? Well, if all the people that get shit done leave your community, who's left? It's the people that don't do anything. So it's tough, because now we're trying to rebuild a community, and sometimes we don't have a whole lot of help. We have in Paddle, right before COVID, like I'm hoping they're going to bring it back this year, this summer, we have a thing called Métis Days. And basically it's like all of the settlements, we go to one settlement, so there's 8 settlements. We go to one and we celebrate. We do Métis things, you know, like we celebrate Métis culture. They have a jigging contest, you know, like we do stuff that Métis people have done since the 1700s. And I think that's super important. But again, you know, I want to be like, you know, happy, but at the same time, like we're struggling because, you know, people aren't wanting to learn our language. They're not, a lot of young people, they want to assimilate, right? Because they're comfortable. They want to stay comfortable. So we it's a struggle, but you know, I do see a lot of good. I see a lot of young people learning our language. Even on TikTok, there's young people speaking Cree and speaking Cree on TikTok, so people can actually see this is what it looks like when you're speaking your own language.
The most ideal situation. We bring an Israeli delegation to your communities.
Yeah.
Who would you think that we should bring, and what do you think should be discussed?
So you're gonna laugh, and I know some people might disagree with me about this, but I don't really care. So I think you should bring religious people, maybe not ultra religious, but traditional religious people, and you know, the people that they're proud of their authentic identity. And I'll tell you why. When I travel around here, that's what I see. Right? That's why I like coming to the Utah and Sharon, right? Because there's a lot of people here with a real authentic identity and a direct. They feel the contact and the direct tie to the land. And I want our people to see those people. And I also want them to see, look, there's two things, right? I want to try and help Israel because there's this idea that the people that live over here are all crazies and extremists, and that the women are all these, you know, very mousy, don't have any education people. And yet I know a clinical psychologist, and she's one of the most brilliant women I know, and she's a settler, and she covers her hair, and you know, she dresses very conservatively. And I think if our women got to see that, they would understand what being traditional and being indigenous doesn't necessarily mean primitive. Like it means what it needs to mean. It just means who we are. There's a lot of people that talk about native pride, right? But then when you ask them, so what does that mean? They can never tell you. And so, like, there's a lot of people that say, like, they get mad when I tell them, you know, we need to be more proud about being Métis. We need to be more open about it. And I've had people actually tell me, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm proud of who I am. But those same people know nothing about their heritage. They don't speak their language. They don't know any of our culture. One of them even tried to tell me that our ancestral land was in Paddle Prairie. And I was like, we've only been here for 45 years. What are you talking about? Like, it was one of those things where I was in shock, right? But to have true pride, to have pride in your authentic identity is a totally different thing. And I think that that's where one of the things we can learn from you is kind of what some of my Jewish friends say they learned from me. They said that one thing they learned from me was to be unapologetic, right? I think that that's a good thing to learn, but then one thing I want my people to learn from you is how to be authentic. How to maintain an authentic identity when the entire world wants you to change. In some ways, like, look, things are better for my generation than they were for my dad's generation, right? Nobody could deny that. The work that generation put in to make things better for us was immense. And because of people like my dad, we don't have to go and ask permission to leave the reserve. So, like, in the 1960s, you had to go to the Indian agent and say, can I please leave the reserve, even if it's just to go work? You had to go ask permission, right? We don't have to do that anymore. And so, I mean, obviously things are getting better and they're improving, but in regards to culture and in regards to the way I see things, I see a lot more intermarriage in our community. So it's funny for someone like me who has a Norwegian mother and a Métis father to be talking about intermarriage, but at the same time, as a product of it, I think I actually saw, some of the trouble with it, because you end up with issues with identity. You end up with this idea that you're trying really hard to be one thing, but you're also something else. Because I do see a lot more young people that are stepping up, and I do see young people learning their ancestral languages. That's huge. But on the same hand, I'm also seeing young people leaving the reserve. And as soon as you stop having that cohesion as a community, it's much more difficult. I mean, the one thing Jewish people do, and it makes sense, you have everything is focused around the village, right? Like, you have to live within walking distance of a shul. You have to have enough other Jews around to have a minyan. Like, you make it so the community is an integral part of who you are. We don't necessarily have that. And I would like to see us try to build something like that.